Hi, welcome to Healing Humanity. My name is Dina, and I want to talk to you today about being an underdog. So, throughout this whole process that I have been trying to either build a business or build something that would make a difference for others, um, I have faced a lot of judgment. And walking this path, I knew that God's judgment was inevitable, right? So I had to shoulder that. I had to carry my cross like the Bible tells us to. But here I looked up, what are the benefits of God's judgment? And it says here, God's judgments serve as a means to uphold his divine law, administer justice, and guide humanity towards righteousness. And through my path, I had to learn to become more righteous than what I was. I was egoic, I was critical, I was um, at times judgmental. I was driven at that time in the beginning towards, you know, building something more, something to do with money. But I know that through that whole process, I kept running into a lot of unforeseen circumstances, things that would just mess me up completely, and I'd have to start all over, being guided to do different things. So I really felt a lot like an underdog. There were times where I was penniless. I didn't know what to do. Um, but I knew and I believed in myself. So I knew that I could keep going if I just kept the faith and kept trudging through. Um, it's James 2:18 kind of drove me through that because he says, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. And I felt like somebody has to see this. Somebody has to see the faith that I have through the work that I'm doing, that I am really trying. I'm trying to follow the Bible. I'm trying to follow God's word and let God lead me. I'm trying to do all of the right things. But that's not what happened. I faced so much pushback and so much hate because I wasn't able or allowed, honestly, because I wasn't allowed to produce financially. And as frustrating as it was for me and humiliating, honestly, as it was for me, because it's not that I couldn't do it, it's just things kept happening. And unexplainable things, a lot of sabotage, a lot of craziness. And people didn't see that part. And they didn't stop to ask me about what was truly going on. They just started to, their frustration started to grow. And so I wound up having my life threatened various times, like I told you. And I was fearful. There were times where I'd lock myself in my room and put furniture against my walls, thinking that I didn't know if I was going to survive the night. Um, there were times where people looked like they wanted to hit me. There were times where people showed up at my house. One time, the person showed up at my house in an all paper white suit with a weapon behind their back. And I can only assume that they meant me harm, severe harm. But I didn't panic in that moment, and I didn't panic in all the moments that kept facing me. I just kept going. I just kept trying, and I just kept staying in love, and I just kept trying to show people who I truly was through all of it. And I figured God's grace would come to me, that there would be somebody that would finally see what the truth was. Somebody would finally understand that I have been out here working my rear end off and nothing's happened. That there's something bigger going on here, that there's some sort of war going on around me that I cannot control. And that was sad. It was super sad for me to lose the faith of the people that I cared about, the people that I worked with, so many people that I worked with, to lose their, not the faith in the work that I was doing at the time, but the faith in me to build something different. the faith in me to be able to help them in their lives. Because had I succeeded in that, their lives perhaps would be different. But what people, I think, didn't see was the fear that they were causing, or perhaps they did. And I know in some instances, like um, one state I was in, there was a group that were talking about selling me, I don't know how, but selling me to a group that would have killed me on camera for money. There's so many things that I knew, but I didn't say. So many things that I felt, but I didn't show. So many things that I wanted to tell you, but you wouldn't have believed me, and you may not now. But now I'm a little bit stronger. Now I'm in a situation where I feel like I'm loved and supported, and that makes all of the difference in the world. Because without love, no one can succeed. Without support and assistance and not giving to somebody, like I'm not a basket case, but to be able to support them emotionally, you don't even have to spend time with them, but they just know that they believe in you, makes all the difference in the world. But there was so much hate and so much fear mongering and frustration on both our parts, mine as well. And I was trying so desperately. I was in a situation where I was not supposed to be stressed out. I had just gone through, being sick for the second time in my life, and I was on a path of healing. I was on a path to figure out, what certain things were going on in my life and why they were happening and what that light was and where my life was going to go, and also to find myself. My kids had just grown up. I had been taking care of people most of my life, and I was left not really knowing who I was. So I was still out there trying and learning new things and seeing what I liked and what I didn't like. And then all craziness blew up. And I know initially you had belief in me. I know initially that you had goals and expectations of me. I understand that. And in some way, I appreciate it. But in others, I have to say that we cannot put our expectations on someone else. That if you want something, you have to work for it yourself. You have to control your life and work for it yourself. Now, could this whole situation have been a wonderful thing for me? Probably. But unfortunately, that's not God's plan. And we have to honor that. We have to understand that as much as I was trying, God was blocking every single avenue. There were paths that he did not want me to take, and it was very clear. So I had to change direction, various different times. And I know that was so angering for you. And it was angering for me too. I'm not the kind of person that I'm not flighty, and I don't lose. I hate it. But I guess I've come to the point where I'm giving it all to God. And I hope you're with me on that, because through all of that judgment and through all of the ugliness and the nasty attitudes and the threats of bodily harm, of harm to my vehicle, of being followed by various different people, terrifying, really terrifying at times. But like I said, I don't let those things get the better of me. And I just kept plugging in. Like when I was Ubering in Texas, none of that was going right. And a couple people towards the end made that very clear that things are not going well for you. And I knew that. And that was super sad. And I felt like, why can I not even make this work? Like this doesn't make any sense to me. And getting relating to the fear and what was happening at the time, this young man got into my car, and he was a little odd, I will say. He was talking to himself, and I would turn to him, and I'm like, and this is at the time when we had to wear masks, and I would turn to him, I'm like, I'm sorry, did you say something? And he would mumble again, and then he'd say something nasty or kind of like rude, and I thought, oh, good Lord, like, this guy's not healthy, and I shouldn't have him in my car. This is one of the last few rides that I had given, and you know, and what I found funny is he got out to get his stuff, and he had this big stick in his hand, and it was like one of those billy clubs that kind of extends out. He had that, and I remember the way that I was parked, I would not have been able to get out of that situation without possibly running him over. And I remember talking to God and saying, God, I will run this guy over. Please do not let me have to do that. Please let me get out of here, and get out of here safely. And the guy, he wound up he's the most memorable one that I had, but he wound up leaning into the car, pointing at me and saying, I love you. And he turned around and walked away. And as I was driving away, he had his hands like this above his head, as I was driving away. And I had to look that up. I wasn't really sure what that meant at the time. And I just shook my head, and thank God I didn't have to run him over. And I looked it up, and he was telling me that I was being oppressed. And he was right. He was 100% right. I had another young lady come into my car, and she was very nervous, was very unsure about coming into the car. And I was stressed. But, we had a nice conversation, and she said, if you ever need anything, I want you to know where you pick me up is where I work. And if you ever need anything, come find me. And I thought, that's kind of odd, because we weren't talking about anything that would have led her to believe that I needed anything. So I thought that was interesting. But through all of this, so much fear, so many signs that I was in potential danger. And I knew that, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. I knew that people were counting on me for whatever reason. I didn't know at the time. I still don't really know the extent of what has happened on your end, but I know that what I've seen on my end, there's been a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety, and like there was in the very beginning, I started to have panic attacks, which I never had. I had anxiety that I've never experienced in my life. I was going through menopause, medication induced menopause. I was trying to lose weight. I was, working out every day. I was trying to work. I'm working 10 to 14 hours, sometimes more a day. It was just, and then to be bombarded with hate from employees for other fellow employees for what to me seemed like no reason. Because at the time I didn't know what this all was. And hate on social media, unbelievably bombarded with an extreme, like, I don't even know if there's a stronger word than extreme. If there is, fit that in there. An extreme amount of hate and violence and threats on my social media feed. And yet I was out there working as hard as I could, to do something, to get something to work. But that's not God's plan. And so I had to give it to him, and at this point, that's where I'm at. And I hope you can understand that, because, when you're the underdog, you can't feed into that fear. You can't feed into the threats. You have no other choice. You have to keep going. There is no other choice. You have no money, you got to work for it. You want to build something, you have to work for it. You want to do something different, you got to work for it. Nobody's coming to save you. Nobody's going to fix your situation for you. You have to just keep going on through. There's a Eleanor Roosevelt said, "I believe anyone can conquer fear by doing the things he fears to do, provided he keeps on doing them until he gets a record of successful experiences behind him." Now, I think that that's really relevant, because there were so many times I just wanted to sit in a corner and stay there. The fear mongering was extreme. The threats were unbelievable, and some things actually did happen. Like my car was hit, I cannot tell you how many times, on purpose. Just odd accidents that were enough to be unsettling, to say the least. There were so many tearful nights, so many desperate moments, but I didn't have time for that. I didn't have time for the tears. I didn't have time for the desperation. All I had time to do was just continue to try to figure out what would work. And that's where we're still at. What will work, I don't know. But I know that I'm not fighting that uphill battle anymore. I'm not going to put myself in harm's way, and I'm not going to fight that uphill battle. I'm going to trust in God, because that's where He wants me to be. So, anyway, that's being an underdog. You don't have time to wait for others. You don't have time to play in to the fear and the anxiety and all that. You have to heal, and you have to heal quickly.